All right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coach's Corner. I'm Dan Tetna. I'm co founder of Seven Movements here with my other co founder, John Sinclair, superhuman, super trainer, super tired.
Super tired.
Oh, I better turn this sound off here. So, John, how you doing? It's been a while since we've been on Coach's Corner here.
It has been. Trying to keep my wits about me. Got so many things going on, juggling chainsaws, coaching, consulting, educating, the whole bit. It's good though.
That's awesome.
I complain, but I really don't have anything to complain about.
Yeah, that's right. But you got to complain to somebody, right? So might
That's
as well
you're
be
here.
the entire internet. We'll just put the complaints on the internet. They disappear.
I guess so.
Out there. So yeah, tell us what you're up to. Like what are some new things in John Sinclair's world right now?
Well, I'm building out the health and wellness experience aboard Ritz-Carlton's brand new yacht collection. So that is taking up a considerable amount of time because we have to write all the programming for every voyage they're going to do for the next year. So that's a lot of work. And we're recruiting and hiring for the position of the wellness coach on the ship. So that's on my plate. So it's been a real busy last month doing that. And then of course, coaching, it's the kind of like the final hurrah for all our seniors in high school down here in Florida. So all the kids that I coach, I've got a whole bunch of them graduating. And so running out and watching them perform and play in some of their final championships and playoffs. So that's been really cool. That's been the highlight of it, is just going out and watching the kids perform. And so two of the kids won another state championship in lacrosse. So that was really awesome to be a part of and to watch, be present when they won it and see all their stuff go flying in the air and then go running and celebrating, like it was the Stanley Cup final. So that was really cool. And then just, stuff we're doing here with Seven Movements. So
awesome.
It's been good times.
Well, I can tell you we have a giant list of questions that have been coming in because we've missed a few Coach's Corner, but I've sort of condensed them into, I guess, little buckets of questions. So we'll try and cover quite a few different things today, if that's all right with you.
Of course.
So let's talk about exercise dosage, because a lot of these questions have to do with how much should I be moving, how much is the right amount, how much is not enough, and how much is too much, because we've talked about all of those things in different forms of questions on Coach's Corner. But I think it would be good to just in general talk about how an individual is going to identify some of this stuff and identify the right dosage of exercise for them on any given day and based on their stress levels and activity levels, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you go about looking at that through how you coach your clients, for example?
Yeah, great question. So let's come up with a little bit of maybe a metaphor here. So imagine that you have a teeter-totter or a seesaw wherever you're from in the world. And on one end is your dosage and the other end is your experience level. Okay. So if you have a high experience level, you can probably in terms of exercise and doing it for many years and consistently, then you probably have a higher dosage tolerance for exercise. But if you've been sedentary and you haven't exercised a lot in the last little while, and I do mean like exercise, like challenging your fitness level, I don't mean physical activity, but then you would have a much lower dosage. So we've got like competing things that are going on. On one side, we've got experience.
Right.
And when we have high level of experience, we can have a higher level of dosage of exercise. When we have a lower level of experience or some stagnation and we haven't done it in a while, we're going to need a much lower dose. And I mean, it only makes sense, right? Like you build a tolerance to exercise, which means you can do more at greater intensities for a longer period of time with greater frequencies.
Right.
We can't do that when we're coming off the couch. So if we're coming off the couch, your dosages have to be higher in frequency throughout the day, but very short in duration. And then we modify complexity of movement with intensity, which is generally dictated by speed and or resistance that we do with our movements. So that's kind of like the general thing that we start with. And then realizing that each individual responds differently to a particular dosage and what that dosage might be. So that dosage, for example, if it's we're on a spin bike, completely different type of dosage to the body than us doing a bunch of weight training for the same length of time. Those are two completely different experiences with a completely different response to the body. When we're on the bicycle, for example, we're loading the muscles of the legs, but you're supported during that time, right? And of course, we're exercising the heart and the lungs. But if we are exercising with weights, right, then we're exercising all the muscles that we're training on those particular days, and we're working the heart and the lungs. So we have to look at different activities as being unique, and then their response to each human being as being unique.
Right. So let's take it a little bit further, and let's talk about those people coming off the couch. How do you go about advising them in gauging how much exercise and dosage they should be? Because we do ask people to push themselves a bit. I would argue quite often the fitness industry maybe ask people to push themselves too hard, and that's when we start to see some damaging behavior. But what would you advise that person coming off the couch to look at to understand, what are the different variables or the different, I guess, maybe tests they could do to determine how much they should be pushing themselves?
Yeah, so a real good, I guess, length of time that you can look to trying to going from off the couch to now being not physically fit, but being obviously fitter and capable of handling greater dosages throughout the week is about a timeline of about 6 months. So we want to have smaller doses for over that 6-month time period, and then gradually start increasing the challenge of the activity. And then we start moving into challenging duration of the session. So I would keep most of your sessions pretty short in your activity dose or of your exercise program dose. And then as we get going, we go a little bit, like we try to challenge you a little further. So give you an example. If somebody hires me for an hour, about 20 minutes of that hour, if they've been pretty sedentary, about 20 minutes of that hour would be of doing some sort of exercise that could be considered a workout.
Right.
The other 40 minutes is us focusing on recovery and focusing on just making sure that their tissues are compliant and being able to feel good when they move. So we spend a lot of time doing a little bit more cardiovascular exercise than resistance training, because we do know that the higher our aerobic capacity and the higher our aerobic fitness is, A, the healthier we're going to be, but B, it also serves as a good baseline of activity for our resistance training. So I tend to spend a higher amount of frequency with people that are just getting going, doing more physical activity throughout the day, aerobic activity when they come to see me, lots of mobility and recovery stuff, and a little bit of resistance training. And then those proportions change as they go, right? So now we can allocate more time and more amount of a higher dose to resistance training, the longer that the more frequently we improve our aerobic and muscular endurance.
Love that. Okay, so small steps, progressively put more and more on and move forward that way. Don't just dive head first off the cliff, because that's a really bad idea.
And a good analogy would be, okay, John hasn't skated in the last 8 years. I'm going to put on my stuff and I'm going to go practice with the Panthers or the Oilers.
That's right. That's
probably not going to work out so well for me. Do you know what I
Probably a
mean? Like,
bad idea. I always give a skiing analogy, right?
that's a good one too.
If you
Yeah.
haven't been skiing for a while, don't go to the top of the mountain and on a double black diamond and just point your skis down, because bad things are probably going to happen to you at some point along that journey.
Yeah.
Might be a fun ride for the first 10 seconds, but then
it'll be fun for the guy behind you watching.
Yeah. So, okay, well, so leading into their next question. So I had a whole series of these questions, but the one that was great, I thought, was so it was, hey Johnny, I'm a weekend warrior. So they play hockey every weekend. Every winter they get injured when they start playing. And he's like, I work an office job and I do most of my sitting and drinking during the summer months. And then winter comes, he plays hockey and he gets injured every single time. He's heard us talk about 7 movements in the past and how that could help him. But what would you, I mean, there's some obvious advice here to move throughout the year, but let's talk a little bit about that office job and the application of 7 movements in particular to help someone prepare for weekend activities, let's say playing hockey.
Yeah, so when you think of a dosage of activity like hockey, well, let's start with the fact that you're playing the most challenging sport to the nervous system that also requires the greatest accumulation of skills in all of sports. So right off the bat, you're playing like the most difficult thing, not only just physiologically, but from a motor development standpoint. So do know that, like, kudos for you to be able to get up and keep wanting to play every weekend. That's amazing. What we need to think about, though, even if we're weekend warriors, is that we have to prepare for our sport.
Right.
I mean, I have folks that come that play tennis all the time. We prep them and train them, even though they're a recreational athlete or a weekend warrior. We prep them just like the tennis pros I train.
Right.
Just like the high school kids we train. You have to prepare the body for the rigors of the demands you're going to place upon it, especially in sport, if you don't want to get injured. Right. You're okay just going out and playing, and then you get kind of nicked up and you don't feel so great about it, then hey, listen, it's your life, do whatever you want. But if you want to improve your performance and not get injured, then it's clear that we need to do some things that are going to enhance your capacities for the sport. Now, with 7 movements, what we've always done is we went, okay, what are the needs of that individual? What are their current challenges as a result of their daily activities or daily requirements for their work? And then how do we improve upon the capacity of exercise that they could possibly be doing throughout the day to make it easier when they go do the things that they love? And then what are the requirements of that activity and what is needed so that you're not getting hurt? So without doing a huge dive, because I could probably talk for about 2 hours on the demands of hockey, but what we would say that is really important is, one, you need really good hip extension. So you need to be very flexible in and around the hip area, right? Because you're on a frictionless surface with 2 pieces of metal. And unless you bend your knees and bend your hips and bend your ankles, you're going to end up on your ass. So that puts you in a constant state of being in a flexed position, which is primarily what you're doing in a chair all day long. So you might say, well, that's the perfect environment for me. I'm already in that hockey position because I'm sitting on my ass. Well, the problem is you're not on your feet. If you put skates on your ass, then that might work, but that's not really going to work out for you too well. So we have to get you up out of that chair and get you moving that hip in the opposite way in which you're doing it currently at work. So in order to stride, you need to push the ice away from you, which puts you into hip extension. The gliding leg stays in hip flexion, which means I'm in a, let me demonstrate it. So imagine we have lots of people here from the United States and not from Canada. I'm trying to explain skating to Canadians, which is hilarious. Everyone already knows that, but in America, they don't. So if we're flexing at the hip and I'm pushing that ice away, this glide leg always stays in that flexed position, right?
Right.
But then there's that transition, right? So the trick is we got to get extension in this hip. If I can get extension in this hip, that's going to take away a lot of stress at the lumbar spine. And then my body's going to feel like I can shift and move. So one of the simple things that we do is we put one knee down. You're still in front of your computer. And we just rock back and forth like this, and we glide like this. So now that I'm gliding, I'm getting some extensibility into these tissues of the hip. And then that will allow me to be able to break down and keep some of this tissue that around here that's a little bit more elastic, that's needed to be elastic on the ice. So we come up with lots of different strategies in our programming to make sure that we're addressing some of these things that happen in the office that are going to hold you back from your sport. So this isn't just universal or a strategy for hockey. This is a strategy for all sport, for all activities. So in the program, we do tons of stuff for creating mobility in the spine, mobility in and around the hip joints, mobility in the foot and the ankle. Because if you don't have that, those basic tenets of range of motion in joints, you are going to get injured. It's just as simple as that. That's not even talking strength needs, power needs, anything like that. You know, when we sit for long periods of time, we drastically lose strength and we drastically lose power. And sport is all about power. It's about generating force quickly, especially in the game of hockey. So we need to teach your body to be more elastic. The easiest way to explain that is you put your hand on your chest. If you're trying to look for a way to train the body, you put your hand on your chest, and this is a good example of it. Try to hit your chest as hard as you can with your middle finger. Okay, and you can barely hear that. I'm hitting it as hard as I can, but this muscle is activating to do that. If I use a muscular-based approach to try to train my body, there's no way I'm going to produce enough force. But if I take my finger and I stretch it and I let it go, you can hear how much force that's hitting with, right? But there's no muscle activity here. So we need to be able to get tissues to be able to generate force quickly. The only way we can do that is by being in a relaxed state and in a balanced state. So we need to have the ability to make sure that all joints in the body sit in their perfect axis of rotation, so their optimal position. And I'm telling you folks out there, you cannot be in an optimal position being seated at a desk 8 hours a day. Cannot do it. You will not be in an optimal position for any sport, for any activity, for anything other than, I don't know, maybe being a jockey. That's about it. Like, that's the only thing I can think of, and I don't think too many
they're
of you
not
out
sitting,
there do that.
They're squatting, right? They're not sitting. They're
squatting, but they're in this position,
right?
So
yeah,
that's
okay,
about the only. That's about the only position that it's going to help you for. So, yeah.
Awesome. I knew that one would get you going. So that's awesome. Okay. So last question for today. So we have several questions that come in from people who talk about limitations to exercise. So they either have a chronic condition that's just limiting them from participating, whether it be they have a disease that doesn't allow them to do high intensity stuff, or they have chronic pain that just doesn't allow them to move like, I guess, average people can move like. So let's take that chronic pain one, I thought, and I wanted to get your advice to someone who deals with random chronic pain, right? Some days are good, some days are bad, but we're telling them to move every day, and some days they're like, I just can't move. What do we tell them, and what's kind of like the first step advice that you would give to someone like that?
Well, I'll give the advice that was given to me by some of my mentors. Dwyer, Scott Hobson, Rodney Korn, Michelle Delcourt, Bobby Capuzio. These are all guys that, really mentored me throughout this process of coaching. And one of the things that they always said was, you can never tell somebody what to do, right? You can only ask them, and them in turn asking their body, what is it capable of doing today, right? And so today is always going to be different than tomorrow when you're someone that has pain. I mean, It's just the way it is. Like, pain is not a definitive cause and effect response.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors that influence pain. From a movement perspective, and as a movement practitioner who, I'm a medical exercise specialist and pain-free movement specialist, and one of the things that we focus on is just identifying what is your current sphere of function.
Right.
Okay. And that sphere of function is like, we call it your bubble. It's where can I move today within this bubble where I don't get pain?
Right.
Right. And then as I start moving and the body becomes more lubricated, it becomes less viscous. I build some confidence in our movement skills that particular day. Then we start to expand that bubble a little bit. So here's a good example. So let's say you're getting pain in your knee. Back this up a little bit. Say you're getting pain in your knee when you do a lunge activity. Okay, so by definition, a lunge is a step and we return back to where we came from. Okay,
Right.
so that's a lunge. So if I go forward and then I come back, if I get pain that far, then I'm like, okay, I got pain in my left knee when I step that far. No pain in my right knee when I step that far. Okay, we step the same distance. I'm just going to step a little smaller, right? And I just match it with the other one. And what this does is it starts to create some rhythm in the body that tells muscles to turn on and off in a sequence that is balanced and symmetrical between the left and right sides. So the brain is capturing all that information through the ground into your connective tissues, through the proprioceptors in the joints, and allows me to understand that, hey, this feels pretty good like this. Okay. So then I start to expand out, or I add another piece to the puzzle. I put my hands in a different direction relative to my feet. And that will allow the body to receive that information and then say, that feels pretty good. I like that. I like how that feels. And then we say, okay, cool, let's move out here. So now what I'm doing is I'm changing my direction. Okay, so at first I started with distance, right? I changed my distance to stay in there. I changed my direction now. I'm still lunging. I'm just lunging in a different direction. And then what I'll do is I might change my depth. So my whole body now is moving into a different depth or height, right? And so those 3Ds, we call them distance, direction, and depth, make up 3D motion, three-dimensional motion. And that creates the triangulation or the space that would basically allow us to build a sphere, right? A sphere is three-dimensional. So if I think of those 3Ds and I start working inside of these movements, I can do lunges, right? I got knee pain. A lot of times people will blame exercises and say, I got a bad knee, I can't do lunges.
Right.
Right. Well, yeah, because your construct of the lunge is this.
That's right.
Of course, you can't do that particular lunge, right? But if you think of the definition of a lunge is just step and return. I got bad knees, I can't do a squat. Well, a squat is just a fold.
Right.
Right? It's a fold of the body. So can you squat from here to here? Yep, no pain. Okay. If I put your stance like this, can you squat? Yep, no pain. But that's not a squat. Fitness instructor told me that my feet have to be shoulder width apart and toes pointed forward.
Well, and this is highlighting everything that is wrong, right? That is it.
Right.
Yeah.
So can you squat like this? Cool. Can you squat with your hands on your knees? Yeah. Okay. Those are all squats. This is my favorite one. Can you go down into a push-up position? Can you squat? If a squat is just folding the body,
right,
all I did is I fold the body, but I changed my orientation to gravity. But what that does is it tells the brain that I can still flex the knee, but I've changed my orientation to gravity. I changed the amount of force going through that knee. So what we do is ultimately we're trying to change somebody's response to physics.
Right.
Right. And exploring three-dimensionality within this world that I have to deal with, which is gravity and the ground reaction force coming back at me. So if we can think of pain as not a negative experience, but pain as a communicative experience, right? That the brain and the tissues of the body and the joints are telling me information to guide me, then I have a completely different relationship with pain, because now that's the best coach you could have. right? Something's going on. What could I do? Well, we got strategies for you.
Yeah.
We could rub and scrub the knee.
Yep.
Right? I can rub and scrub the knee and warm it up and drive some circulation there, make it less viscous. And then when I move into it, the knee's like, hey, thanks a lot. The brain's like, yeah, you're good to go, bud. Away you go.
That was such a valuable answer, John, because I think it highlights one of the significant challenges that exists within like the fitness coaching industry, is that there's a right and a wrong way to move.
Yeah.
And we've been teaching people that for a very long time, is like, no, this is the only way to lunge. This is the correct way to lunge. This is correct way to squat.
This is the best exercise for this. This is the top 10 this.
That's right.
It's all a bunch of clickbait is all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's just to get out and start moving and move within, what did you call it? Your bubble?
Your sphere of function, or your bubble.
Sphere of function, or your bubble, which is awesome. So what a great place to start for everybody, I think. So when we say anyone can participate in a 7 movements program, that's actually what we're talking about, because you can take any exercise or any movement dose that we're delivering to you and make it your own by just keeping it within your sphere of function. And you don't need to look exactly like Johnny on the screen, because you're probably not going to look like John on the screen anyways.
Lucky for you.
It's hard to grow a beard like that, right? So thank you for that, John. I think that's going to be a very valuable answer for a lot of people who are struggling. I run in those circles a lot with folks with chronic conditions, and I hear a lot like, well, I can't exercise. I can't do it. Because they see exercise through the lens of a 30-minute or an hour-long session at the gym, doing specific the top 10 exercises that for them or whatever is going on, versus, hey, let's just move a little bit.
Yeah, and you know what? There's 2 issues also, and not just in the fitness industry, but we also see it in physical therapy, which is that we try to apply a protocol to a particular injury based on pain. And that doesn't work either, because you're taking into account that everybody's pain is exactly the same. Right. There's so many constructs to pain, right? So it's not just structural, it's also mental, emotional, there's social, there's financial issues. All those things can contribute to stress, and then it's manifested into whatever is going on here. There's identity. So we can sometimes identity is we create an identity around, oh, I'm the guy with the bad knee. Right. If I've had it for 20 years, yeah, you probably are the guy with the bad knee. You know what I mean? So what we have to do is we have to look at things through that lens that movement is universal. Right. The constants that we're under is gravity and ground reaction force. We do know that everyone's built a little bit differently, right? They have their scars of all their years of moving in certain ways that impact them. But if they look at it from the perspective that John's bubble is different from Dan's bubble, which is different from Beverly's bubble, well, then now we're starting to look at the world through a completely different construct. And that construct is that movement needs to be first purposeful, and then it has to be task-based. So what is the task that I'm trying to accomplish in this moment? And then how do I teach that task? By allowing somebody by giving someone the permission to find the way to get the job done, right? Instead of this one way to get the job done.
That's right. So the right way versus the wrong way. Yeah.
So that's the approach we take when we're working with people with, maybe diabetes or Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis. It's the same thing. Like the universal parameter around it is movement and our response to the forces on Earth. So it doesn't matter to me what your condition is. What matters to me is how you understand these capacities and knowing that your capacity is a little bit different.
Right.
So if you have Parkinson's and you're challenged with balance, okay, well, here are the movements that we're going to do that are going to challenge your challenge with balance, but do it in a way that builds confidence for you. Right. And there's a gazillion ways that we could help that unfold. And then there's the understanding of, if somebody is struggling with their balance, well, is it motor? Is it vestibular? Is it the brain, the eyes, the ears, or is it sensory? Right. So if they get a tremor, is it triggered by the sensory system? And if it was triggered by the sensory system, well, we could do something with that. Let's give them something that they can grab and hang on to, right? And have some sort of tactile sensation, or something that's a little bit scratchy in their hand, or they hit their hand a few times and then they grasp something, right? And then they go through the task. So there's lots of ways that we can, engineer your performance based on your capacity, but that's understanding that they're all underneath this umbrella of physics. And so, one of the smartest things that I've ever heard somebody say is that physiology is your body's response to physics. I think it was Tom Purvis was the instructor that said that to us one time. And it really resonated with me because, it has to be true because it's in the root word. Right?
That's awesome. So all in all, movements for everybody. So that's
right.
A great message, and awesome. Well, I would be remiss on Coach's Corner if I didn't ask you the most important question of all.
Oilers.
We've got Battle of Alberta starting tonight.
Yeah.
Who do you got? What's going to happen? What's the prediction
for tonight's game?
Just for tonight. We got other Coach's
game.
Corner coming up, so we'll deal with that when it comes. But let's just go tonight's game. Game 1 in Calgary, the old Saddle Dome. We got McDavid versus Goudreau, Markstrom versus Smith. Who's going to pull this off today?
Yeah. Well, I've got to pick the Oilers because I'll never pick the Flames. So if it's up to me, that's right. If it's up to me, it would be they'll sweep them. But that's not going to happen because you got to give too much credit to the Flames because they're an excellent hockey club coached by an excellent coach. So it's going to be a tough fought battle. I think it's just the way in which Edmonton has played of late. If they can maintain that same level of intensity with the same level of desperation, with the same level of working for one another, I think they'll come away with the win tonight.
I think so too. I think there could be a surprise tonight. I think everybody's expecting Calgary to win, and I think this is where
I really think Edmonton's peaking at the right time and Calgary's not. And so I think that's what we have going for us anyway.
Hey, and people keep in mind these are two Oilers fans talking here. So
that's right. That's right.
I'm sure
all you
Flames
Calgary fans, I know I'm gonna eat it real soon.
You're gonna eat some. Yeah, I'm just expecting it. That's part of the rivalry. It's part of the joy of this. So thank you, John. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you again the next Coach's Corner.